Hi, Steve. Welcome to the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast.
Hi, Julia. Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yes, we're excited to have you. I can't wait for you to share your inspirational kind of personal story with the listeners, and then also some kind of business inspiration that you have to offer. So I would love to dive in. And if you would, could you give our listeners a general idea as to kind of what you're currently doing in the health and fitness space? And then I'm going to ask you to kind of back it up and tell us how you got started there.
Awesome. Great. Well, it is a strange space now in the health and fitness field, because things have definitely been turned upside down in the past year and a half, 2 years since COVID hit. So I've got a lot of things going on. I am still working at my private training studio in Los Angeles, but I relocated myself and my family down to Orange County, which is about an hour away from Los Angeles. So I'm doing a little less training at my studio and doing more virtual training, which was kind of brought on by COVID. I knew it existed, but it made it a necessity to do. And clients then became also more open-minded to that possibility. And it created that need. And that's what I've got a lot going on there. But I also opened up another business down here called Newport Beach Private Fitness. And I'm building and growing that now. It is not a physical location yet, but it's a virtual on-site in-home gym. I've built an in-home gym and people come here and I go to people's homes. So I'm building a team of practitioners here to service the people of Orange County, Newport Beach, and nearby. And I just wrote a book, and I've got my own podcast, and I am public speaking as well, doing retreats for the Canyon Ranch, which is a luxury retreat in Arizona, Northern California, and also Massachusetts. So I've been doing that, and I've got a few lined up for this year, as well as some business kind of lunch and learns where I'm going to speak to executives and other business leaders on how to maintain health and wellness within their companies and businesses and for themselves. So as you can see, I've got a lot going on, a lot of things juggling, but that's how I like it. And it's always within the health and fitness space. So it's something that comes very easily for me.
Yes. Yeah. And when we kind of have our hands in a little bit of everything, it keeps it interesting. It keeps you engaged. And it's a field that we're always learning, right? There's always something to learn, whether it's, in the health and fitness space itself or business wise or, so yeah, that's great. So give us a little bit of a backstory. So how did you kind of fall in love with health and fitness? What was your personal story?
Julie, well, I've always been into health and fitness from a young age. I was very athletic and I played a lot of sports and played in the playgrounds with my friends. I was more of the kid rather than sitting in front of in television or Atari at the time. That's going to date me. Many people, you might not even know that, but that's like early 80s. I want to go out and play yard football or touch football or baseball or ride my bike or skateboard. And so movement was always part of my life. And fast forward in high school, I became more very focused on lacrosse and football and was excelling in those sports. So I started to exercise and train. My dad had a gym in his back office, and I used to go back there with some of my buddies, and we'd throw around the weights and pull on pulleys and things that he had there. And I had a really natural knack for the form and for progress. I always progressed and built muscle faster than my friends, and it felt good. And it made me feel a confidence. So that's kind of where I got my first kind of taste and love of movement and exercise and fitness. Now, fast forward into college, I went to the University of Maryland to play lacrosse. And that ended up not happening because I ended up having an accident that nearly took my life the beginning of my sophomore year. I had fell off of a balcony at the at the Johns Hopkins University, where my buddy, who I grew up with and played football with, was a quarterback there. And I went to go watch him play on a Friday night. To make a long story short, we were screwing around after the game. It was like 1 a.m, me and another guy, and we were on a balcony that we really shouldn't have been up there, but there was a lot of people up there kind of playing and hanging out and drinking and, just doing their thing. And my buddy and I fell off, kind of roughhousing, being knuckleheads. And I landed 18 feet onto my head, onto the concrete, and literally split my head open. I had opened my head up. I had gray matter coming out of my ears. I was knocked unconscious. I was bleeding to death, literally in my friend's arms, the one that was going to school there. And when the paramedics came, I was taken to the University of Maryland Shock Trauma Center, which was fortunately a short ride, where they diagnosed that I had brain swelling and I was losing spinal cord fluid, and again, gray matter oozing out of my ears. And I was in a life and death situation where they had to stabilize me and perform brain surgery to save my life and save my brain, to prevent maybe brain damage or further brain damage. They had no idea what was going to happen. So I had about a 7-hour brain surgery. And I was in intensive care. I was in a coma-induced state for about 4 days, and I was in intensive care for 2.5 weeks with a bedside nurse 24 hours a day, catheters and other tubes running in and out of me. I was slowly in and out of consciousness and kind of alertness. I really didn't know where I was or how I had gotten there. I don't remember anything of that accident or even a little bit prior to that. And it was a really, really hard situation. I had never in my life been in a situation ever even close to this. I had broken a couple bones, but I had never been hospitalized, and this was the test of my life. I had just a couple little things that occurred in there. They recognized that I had short and long-term memory loss when they were doing the assessments after a couple of weeks of kind of recovery, which meant I couldn't remember a lot of things that happened in my past. Long-term memory, short-term memory. Like if you had told me your name, Julia, I wouldn't remember it. If you gave me a 7-digit phone number, I would remember maybe 3 digits. I was really challenged mentally and cognitively. I also had tip of the tongue syndrome, which we all get sometimes when you want to remember a word and it's on the tip of your tongue. You're like, I can't remember that word. It's on the tip of my tongue. And that's a recall problem or challenge where it's stored in the memory, but the recall, be able to pull it out of your memory, isn't able to happen. And that was happening to me in every sentence. I couldn't finish sentences completely without getting stuck on easy words that we take for granted today. Also, I had ixnasia, which means I can't smell. And many people are aware of that now, especially with COVID. I had damaged my olfactory nerve. So they were severed and I can't smell. I also lost hearing in my left ear. So I had crushed my eardrum from the impact of the fall. So your eardrums are the smallest bones in your body. And I crushed them and I was completely deaf in my left ear. As well as, like you can kind of go on and on. The final and kind of most obvious was I had Bell's palsy, which is a facial nerve paralysis. Many people get it from immune system challenges. Pregnant women can sometimes get them. And it sometimes happens for people who have head injuries. The facial nerve that is kind of sits right underneath your ear, mine was crushed and it was damaged again from the fall and the impact. So my left side of my face was sagging. I couldn't move any muscle in the left side of my face. So I talked out of the side of my mouth. I talked with a slur because I couldn't open my lips to talk with the right enunciations and pronunciations and incantations. So I looked deformed. I looked lopsided. My face was lopsided. When I went to sleep at night, my left eye stayed open. So they were going to have to perform another brain surgery to replace my facial nerve with my peroneal nerve, which is down near your calf. And they were hoping for a 50% recovery, which would just give me enough facial movement to be able to prevent like really a deformity. And I mean, this scared the heck out of me. It was terrifying. I was a good-looking kid, athletic, smart. You could say I had it all. Even in high school, I actually won a scholarship by the U.S. Army. It was called the All-American Award, and it was something that kind of, I was a scholar athlete. I was, a person that was, looked up to and revered, and people. I was friends with everybody. I was the guy who beat up the bullies. Like that kind of guy. The All-American. And so I ended up, it was just a devastating time. After about a month and a half in the hospital, a couple of days before my brain surgery that I was going to have for the facial nerve replacement, I looked in the mirror at myself with a head swollen the size of a basketball. I had over 100 staples and stitches in my head to sew the surgery scar and the scar that was caused from the impact together, looking at someone I could not recognize. And I cried and I stared in that mirror. And after several minutes or moments, I can't count the time right now, but it was a moment, it was a moment when you have like this epiphany in life where you kind of like, what is going on? And I can't believe this is happening to me. And what am I going to do? How do I get out of this? And for some unknown reason, I call it a miracle. The miracle of movement. And something willed me to try and move my lip. And I tried to move my lip and move my mouth, and I couldn't do it. And I did it again, and I did it again, until this one time I got a lip movement out of my upper lip. And if you're listening, I can only explain it like, if you ever watched Elvis Presley perform, I say Elvis Presley because my dad is a big Elvis Presley fan. When he sang, he had this kind of the smirk on his face where his lip would curl up. Mm-hmm. And I was able to do that. And I didn't know anything about exercise science. I didn't know anything about nerves. I didn't know anything about like this being a miracle or phenomenon at the time. But I did it again and again until I could do it with very little effort. I went to bed that next day. My parents came to the hospital and they were there to support me. And I look back and I'm so grateful for my friends and family who were there by my bedside for those 3 months that I was in the hospital. And even during my recovery, who supported me. I don't think I would have been recovered as well as I would have if they were not there. But my parents and I were going to go to the hospital doctor's office to talk about the date of the surgery and talk about the procedure and the risks and the benefits. And this surgery was going to happen within days. So when we get there, on the way there, I told my parents I was able to do this. And again, my parents, not doctors or understanding nerve science or anything like that. They said, okay, honey, we'll make sure you tell the doctors. So the doctors gave us the dates and let's do this in the next couple of days, because the longer that this nerve stays impaired and paralyzed, the less it's likely it's going to recover when we do the implant. So my mom said Stephen was able to move his lip, and they said, "Oh, that's impossible. The CAT scan showed this nerve is severed and completely damaged." So my mom said, "Stephen, show him." And I showed them, and they nearly fell out of their seat. This is one of the top neurosurgeons at Johns Hopkins University and a top ENT doctor at Johns Hopkins. They were in shock. They could not believe what they were seeing. The ENT walked up to me, put his hand on my shoulder and said, "Kid, you're a miracle." And he walked out of the room. The neurosurgeon made me do this over and over again. And as I say this, I get chills because it brings back this memory. He said, "This is unbelievable. I can't believe this." And he said, my mom told me this after several years ago when I've kind of asked her to kind of replay the incident for me at that doctor's office. She said, the doctor said, quote unquote, modern medicine, huh? And he like kind of just was dumbfounded. He did no explanation, no reason why, how this could have happened. Yes, that's the miracle. The miracle that I actually believe in is the miracle of the timing of it, right? So we always talk about timing. Had that not happened at that day, on that night, 2 days before that surgery, I would have had that surgery and I definitely would not have recovered the way I recover. Julia, you can see me. I have no discrepancies facial wise. I can move my face. I can move my mouth. I can have a full smile. The only discrepancy I have in my mouth is the bottom lip doesn't go all the way down all the way as far as my right side of my lip. So if I have a big hamburger or some big like chicken sandwich, I have to use my thumb and push my lip down. Otherwise I'll bite my lip. So that's the only thing that happens. And when I talk, if you notice, like I'll have a little bit of an asymmetry. My left lip doesn't come up and move as much as my right. That's the only thing that happened. So that was like the start of where I understood that movement was something that could miraculously change our minds, our bodies from the inside out. From that moment on, I made a decision, a declaration, a commitment to myself that I was going to fully recover, no matter what anybody ever said. And from that moment forth, I put together my mindset and just had a strong mindset of will, of discipline, of focus, of commitment. I had to do facial exercises for almost a year to move my face. The doctor gave me a list of facial exercises, making silly sounds like moo, wah, me. So you're moving your face muscles like you would exercise your body part if you impaired it. So I would do that. And then I was ambulanced back to New Jersey, where I ended up having to go to cognitive therapy for 4 months to relearn, kind of learn how to memorize, summarize, speak in full sentences, get ways to train my brain. And this is also where I realized that, it's not just about like your physical body, which I was always very into. Like your mind is very important too. You can exercise your mind. And I had never thought about exercising my mind, but these people, these cognitive therapists, were literally exercising my mind and my brain to help stimulate new synapses and new firing patterns and neural pathways to create new ways of memorizing and using words and having living a normal life. And so that was part of the process as well. About a year later, I had reconstructive ear surgery to either replace or repair my eardrum, which was repaired. Fortunately, I didn't have to have a replacement. The ENT that walked out of the room and called me a miracle was the one that did the surgery. So I had to have reconstructive ear surgery to restore my hearing, which is not 100%, but it's good enough. I can hear people on the other end of the phone. I'm not really impaired there anymore. But it was a very, very challenging time. And towards the end of that 4-month time in the cognitive rehab where I had to recover, I started to exercise again. I was released to kind of move my body. And I went to the local gym in New Jersey because I had taken off of school. I couldn't go back to school. And they didn't even know if I would be able to go back to school and could be in a curriculum of the, studies that I was in, which was kinesiology, believe it or not. It was a study of human movement and performance. But I was my freshman year, I was a letters and science major. And then I declared a major my sophomore year, thinking I might want to go down the road of some kind of, thing, because my advisor said, you have to pick a major now. And movement was always something, sport was always something I'd been into. And this kind of, this degree of kinesiology was something, exercise science was something I was into, but I had no idea where I was going to go with it. And I started exercising and seeing the magnificent and miraculous, recovery that I was having and the way I was inspiring people around me. It was awesome to see. And my recovery was happening at a much faster rate, not just physically, but mentally as well. And emotionally, I was emotionally distraught. I was completely I can't even describe the feelings that I was having, but I was completely and emotionally distraught. So exercise was birthed there. And I say that I fell into my career, no pun intended, but that is literally where my career was birthed because I was starting to inspire friends and peers on exercise. They were astounded by my recovery and what I was able to do in less than a year of having this major brain surgery, major brain trauma, and seeing what that was like and seeing how I was moving, how I was changing my body and my mind and the way I was doing things and the strength that I had. So I started to take friends to the gym and work them out and show them what to do for this and that. And then as I started to progress down my career and I actually went back to school, I was very fortunate to be able to test well enough to go back to school. I went back to school and I really dove into my career, into the study of kinesiology. I wasn't as good of a student as I once was because I did have challenges, with memory still. And the exercise sciences has to do a lot with memory because it's a lot of anatomy and biology biology and things of that nature that you need, physiology that you need to understand and memorize. But I did well enough and inspired people around me. They were, it was just something that I fell into. And then I got certified through the American Academy of Sports Medicine. And that was something that I just found to be a natural ability. And that's where my career was birthed. And I can kind of get more into detail there. But I think that was very a synopsis of what I went through at such a challenging time. And I say breakdowns can lead through breakthroughs. And that's exactly what happened. My breakdown led through a breakthrough in my career, my life, my all of who I am. Like, that was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I wouldn't be who I am today had not happened.
Oh my gosh. I was sitting here listening to you the entire time, thinking to myself, like, don't cry when it's your turn to chime in. Don't cry. Everybody who listens to this podcast know I can get emotional, but I'm sitting here looking at you as you're telling this story. And some of our listeners will maybe just be listening to this audio. And I'm thinking to myself, it's amazing that you went through that experience. Like, there's no sign of any of that at all. And not just at a physical sense, but clearly your brain is 100%. I mean, you're speaking all of that. You made what sounds to me, and it sounds like doctors would agree, like a miraculous recovery. And you can't help but think back probably to that moment, and the moment that you looked in the mirror, started to cry and thought, like, I'm going to do something about this. And you're like, I'm going to move my lip. Like, okay. But instead of just becoming the victim, and I think Tony Robbins, he always says things happen for you and not to you, right? And taking yourself out of that victim mindset, what could be more traumatic? And nobody would, blame you for being a victim in that moment, right? That's when, of course, you could fall apart, but you didn't. And just amazing that was what you went through, and that you made the recovery that you made.
Thank you. And it's, as you were sharing that, I got chills again, because it's part of human nature is we kind of tend to forget or push down those negative experiences in our lives, heartbreak, whatever it is, like they get pushed down into our subconscious or somewhere where we don't necessarily dwell on those. But when you just shared how I moved and inspired you there, like, it made me realize really how much I went through. And when I tell the story, it made me realize how much I went through, because I tend to just put it back in, on the back burner and just kind of, oh, well, that was just part of my life. But really I can't, words can't even really describe. I almost want to cry right now, because it really is like, I can't tell people how hard it was. It was crazy, like really, really, like beyond. It's, yeah, like you can see.
And at that age,
yeah,
like 19, it's such a vulnerable age. It's probably the most vulnerable age. Yeah. Where if I think back to when I was 19, it was, had no idea who I was. Forget to look in the mirror and see that you're basically on the brink of death potentially, or you were at least, and coming to grips with that and putting your mind in this direction versus that direction, which this probably made all the difference in your life. And in that instant of a moment, you were able to shift. And that must be something, that you instill in your clients.
Absolutely. And that's what I love to do, is I motivate, inspire, and educate my clients. There's an important caveat to that. I believe part of why I was able to make that shift there in that time was because I played sports during my life. I wasn't always the fastest. I wasn't always the biggest. I wasn't always the best. I was good, really good. But there was people that were better. And many of the friends that I hung around with were better. So like you become, like Tony Robbins says, you become the 5 influences, in your life, or that you surround yourself around. That is also true. My friends were all like really hard working, and I got knocked down, and it was like, how quickly am I going to get back up? I want to be like back in the game. I want to be back into the mix. I don't want people to look at me and think I'm weak or that whatever. And like, I think that also helped to fuel that time, right? Because I didn't want people to ever look at me differently. I wanted to be inspiring to people. So that was something. And then, of course, as I mentioned, my family, my mom took off of work, was there with me every single day for those 3 months in the hospital. My dad would drive back and forth 3.5 hours from New Jersey to Baltimore, and like 2-3 times a week because he had to work, but he would just drive down, even if it was just for like 5 hours. I mean, they were, again, I want to cry, but like, they were amazing.
Yeah. And do you have kids? Are you a dad?
Not yet. My wife is pregnant.
Okay. Well,
she's pregnant with our first. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a mom. And when you hold that baby for the first time, you'll know why they drove back and forth. So we'll leave it at that. Cool. But back to this is also why I'm so passionate about movement for kids, right? All of that athleticism and that competition as a child, right? Had you been a couch potato, you wouldn't have had that drive. You wouldn't have known what it was like to, quote unquote, maybe physically fight for your spot, or right. And that's another thing that built you to the place that you were at. Yeah, it's just an amazing story. And I'm so appreciative of you sharing it with our listeners. So you talked about this term, which I absolutely love. Breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. So you got to the point where you launched, your fitness business. How old were you when you did that?
So I was 21 years old. My first client was my hairstylist. And I was getting my hair cut. I was still at school, University of Maryland, and I was getting my hair cut. And this guy, I told him I was getting certified to be a personal trainer. And he said, "Oh, that's interesting." And the next time I came in and he said, "Did you get certified yet?" And I said, "No, not yet. My test is coming up." He goes, "Well, when you get certified, let me know. I'd like to hire you because I've always been skinny, kind of frail kind of person. I want to build some muscle. And I'll hire you." And I was like, awesome. I got my first client. I passed the test and went in. I said I passed, and he hired me. And I found a local gym in College Park area. And we both joined, and I started training him like 3 times a week at 7 a.m. And to do that in college was kind of cool. Like, I started my career there, and then he started to get results. And then he started to tell some of his clients. And before he knew it, I had a book of business of like 4 or 5 people. I charged him $20 an hour. And then I started to work with some other people, and he helped coach me a little bit as well. And he said, "This person can afford more, like charge them more." And I went to like 35 and then 45. And I remember at the highest, I was like $50 an hour. In college at 21, 22 years old, I was making like $400 a week, $300 a week in cash. It was amazing. I was like this is amazing. And I was loving what I was doing, and I was loving seeing the transformations, and, I was inspiring people, and it was great. And then I had a really another extraordinary kind of like lucky break when I went to the University of Maryland, had sponsored this AT&T corporate wellness seminar. So that was when corporate wellness was becoming big. It was like 1997, 98, like AT&T and other Johnson & Johnson were building these wellness centers and corporate wellness centers. And I thought maybe that was a professional route that I could go into because, not necessarily being an entrepreneur, and I didn't want to stay in College Park my whole life, and, maybe going and doing like fitness management or something like that. And these corporate wellness places might be of value. So I went and I sat in on this lecture by a guy named Ted Vicky. He was the White House athletic director. And after he spoke, about having your email on a business card was part of his conversation. That just kind of, again, dates me. And what it was like in 1997, people barely had emails. I was inspired for whatever reason to go talk to him after. And after a short chat, he asked me if I had a resume. And I said, no, but I'll bring one tomorrow. I went home, brought my resume in, gave it to him. And 2 weeks later, he called me in and said, "Listen, I got an internship opening up to be a trainer here at the White House. Would you be interested? I'd like to interview you." And I was like, yeah, of course. I went down for the interview, got hired, and now I was a trainer at the White House. And I worked with senators, congressmen, staff under the Clinton administration. It was high security. It was in a fitness center called the WAC, which is in the old executive office, which is adjacent to the White House. And WAC stands for White House Athletic Center. And it was amazing because now I had my own business. I was a trainer at the White House, and my self-value and perception of what I could do and who I was as a fitness professional just was elevate it. And that's where kind of, again, my career started. And from there, I moved to New York City and had a really great career in New York City and was able to be on the Today Show and a lot of TV networks and magazines and things that I was able to really kind of just leverage and use some of my strengths and public speaking and being on camera. And, again, here just 6 years prior, I mean, you wouldn't even want to look at me. And I couldn't even finish sentences. And here I am on live television on the Today Show talking about fitness with Ann Curry, discussing something about the relevance of fitness or whatever product I was, kind of endorsing or not endorsing. I was the fitness expert and it was amazing. So it was just an extraordinary journey. And it was luck, it was timing, but I believe that it's when somebody is prepared, it's when somebody is passionate, when someone really believes in what they're doing, the opportunities will find them and they are, you're able to maximize your potential in those, and they will then, you can then use those and leverage into other ones. Like they'll lead to other ones is kind of the point I was making. So that's where it happened. Then I moved to California 20 years ago because New York was a little too gritty and grindy for me. I loved it and I love it and I always will. It's where where I grew up and family still is. But California is where I had a dream of being a trainer to the stars and, working with celebrities. And I had always wanted to, I took one business class and the business class I took was location. That's what I learned in that business class, so you got to be in the right location with the right kind of business. And fitness was big in Los Angeles, and celebrities were, known to hire personal trainers, and personal trainers like Body by Jake, who's a friend of mine now, was, a trainer to the stars, and he's been on my podcast. And, this guy, I was like, I look up to these guys, and I want to be like them. And that's what I did. And then I have fulfilled that and worked with dozens of celebrities. And I've owned a private training studio right near Beverly Hills. It's in Westwood, which is UCLA adjacent. This March will be 15 years. And I've worked with some very extraordinary people in there, not just celebrities or people in the industry, but the moms and the kids and the fathers and the wives and the grandparents and people who have been paralyzed in different ways. It's just been a remarkable career, but with that, it didn't come easy. As we said, breakdowns lead to breakthroughs. Opening the studio, if you're a health and fitness professional or a business owner, the labor of love that comes with it. It's like, you don't just open up the doors like saying like, build it and they will come. That's not necessarily true. It's not necessarily true. Even though I had a following and I had a name and a presence, it was still very challenging to turn it into a business and make it more profitable with a lot of overhead. As you can imagine, the real estate and prices in Los Angeles are expensive. So it was a challenging time in 2008 when the economy crashed. I nearly went bankrupt. I was at the top of my career at a point and then literally had like dollars in my bank account where prior I had, 6 figures in my bank account. And it was very challenging to kind of come to terms with that. I remember my dad saying, well, Stephen, maybe the dream's over and you got to come home, and I was like, whoa, that kind of took me by surprise. It wasn't what I was hoping he would say, but it did fuel some fire in me. And I was like, no way, like I'm not giving up. That like not quit attitude, or that I'm not going to let that paralysis hold me back. I'm going to find a way. Right. And that's what I did. I found a way. And I was able to recover from that and have a successful career and build a business and a lifestyle for myself that I'm very proud of from that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. So, I mean, when you had in that moment, right? So like your dad says, like maybe it's over. Why don't you come home? Give it up already. Do you think back to that moment in the hospital where you're like, wait a minute, I've overcome way worse? Or are you just kind of like going through the motions at that point? Like, no, I'm going to save this business.
I don't think I really correlated that time and then like thought back about that time. I think that is so built into my DNA that it just kind of automatically happens. I mean, I remember even when a kid, when it's like, oh, you can't do that. And I'd be like, oh yeah, I will, and sometimes successfully, probably more often failed, but I would always at least try it and do it. So, at least I knew new. So I think that it just kind of fueled me. Like it made me, I did seek the advice of sorry for the noise in the background. My landscaper's here right now. I don't know if you can hear. Okay, good. But I did have when I was a kid, like I always made myself like, I always pushed myself hard. I was a go-getter, nothing came easy. Some things came easier, as we can all relate to, but I pushed myself and I worked hard, and it was, the work ethic that I had through sport and through my parents and my peers and friends. I think is so important, as you being a mom and me to being a dad soon. Like, it's important who you hang around with. It's important who you associate with. It's very important what you read, what you watch, because all these things influence you. And I had good influences in my life, whether it be coaches, friends, family, all around. What was around me was positive. So that's really important.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It just slowly shapes you over time. If you had to give one piece of advice, so if we have, health coaches starting out, or even fitness professionals starting out, or maybe they're in the middle of their career, if you had to give, one piece of advice to maybe get through, whether it be a challenging time or to get started, what would be one little piece of advice?
And I think it's what my friend and colleague, Jake Seinfeld, says in Body by Jake, is don't quit. Quitter. This is a saying that my football coach used to say: quitters never win and winners never quit. And what are you going to be today, a winner or a quitter? And I always wanted to be a winner, and we all want to be winners. Winning feels good. Winning is positive. Winning has a lot of positive effects on us, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And it's important to obviously like throw in the towel if you need to, right? If it really, like, you don't want to like beat a dead horse, but you want to make sure that you are doing your best. Like, I find that probably today too many people quit because it's easy, and it's a lot of there's a lot of things that you can. There's too much stimulus, right? There's not enough fallback. Like, I think the whole idea of everybody's a winner is kind of nonsense, because we're not all winners and not everybody can win. And it's just the way of life. And I think if you promote that, and if that's what's, promoting, that is a disservice, in my opinion, to the individual and to our society. And it causes mediocrity and laziness. So that, I think, is important. So to summarize what I just said there, don't quit.
Yep. Yeah, I completely agree. It's when there's nothing, when there's no level to work for, it's kind of like, well, we could all just sit back and hang out, and we'll all just sit at this low, mediocre level, and then we're all winners. So yeah,
exactly.
And instilling it in kids, again, then that little boy, 19-year-old, doesn't look in the mirror and think like, no, I'm gonna, like, I have other friends that are doing all the things I want to do. I'm going to get over this. That killer instinct goes away, and who knows, what it prevents people from accomplishing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I would love for you to share with our listeners where they can find out more about you, programs you have, or social media pages, websites, all of the ways that they could learn more.
Sure. So to find out and learn more about me, you can go to stevejordan.com. That's my personal website. You'll see kind of highlights of my career and things that I've done. A lot of what I shared sometimes has happened way before social media and taking pictures and video camera phones. So, it's what's on there is what's on there. And I'm not super crazy about social media, but you'll get a sense of who I am. My hashtag for Instagram is _Steve Jordan. You'll find me there. And then my business, I have just opened up, a new business that I was sharing, NewportBeachPrivateFitness.com. And then I have WestwoodPrivateFitness.com. And I also am doing a virtual class. As COVID kind of happens, and the opportunity to do virtual and to reach the larger audience was an opportunity. I took advantage of it. So I offer a class, and I've got people from Maine, New Hampshire, Florida, and all over taking this class on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 12 noon Pacific Standard Time. And it's on Zoom. So it's a platform that Zoom created for people in the service business to be able to provide a service for people. It's called on.zoom.us. And you'll find my class on there. It's called Level Up. And it's an opportunity. It's a 45-minute class to work with me virtually and create a mind, body, and spiritual connection. So I do functional training. I've got a variety of programs we do. It's always fun. You don't need a whole lot of equipment, a foam roller, a mat, dumbbell, kettlebell, whatever you have, we make it work. So I would love to see you on there. It's a very inspiring and motivating opportunity. And why not? If you can't be here in LA or Newport Beach to work with me wherever you are in your living room. And that's what's been beautiful about COVID and, creating this opportunity in our business and many businesses to go virtual and to be in touch with people that we normally wouldn't have been able to be in touch with or help or service. Yep. So that's where you can stay in touch with me. And listen, I'm also happy to respond to emails. I'm really good about that. I'm happy to give my email out, steve@stevejordan.com. If you want to shoot me an email, if I inspired you, if this was a conversation that maybe you want to learn more about, or even if you wanted to chat, if you were in a desperate or a space where you felt you needed someone to kind of lean on, I'm happy to do that because I'd like to give back because there were many people in my life that did that for me, and I'm happy to do that for you if you need that. So please reach out, steve@stevejordan.com.
Oh, thank you so much for that. It's we've talked about this many times on this podcast with various guests. It's the best part about this industry is we typically people who go into the business of serving, helping, quote unquote, healing others. We've almost always had a story of our own where we've needed that, we've gotten it, and then vowed to kind of give it back. So thank you for that. That's incredibly kind of you. The
pleasure is all mine.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being a guest on the Integrative Health Coach Success Podcast. This was such a pleasure. And I'm so appreciative for all the valuable inspiration you shared with our listeners.
Thank you, Julia. I am so appreciative that we were able to have this conversation. Thank you all for listening. One last thing is listen to my podcast. It's called The Steve Jordan Experience. I didn't mention that, but it's a podcast I've been doing for almost 4 years, and I have great guests on there as well. So please tune into that as well. And Thanks for listening.
Yes, thanks so much. Okay, great. Thanks for adding that. We'll add all of that to the show notes. And thanks again, Steve.
Thanks, Julia.
Bye-bye.